House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer is echoing Republican demands that the top U.S. commander in Afghanistan testify to Congress immediately in wake of his assessment of the war situation. Rachel Maddow, of course, hosts MSNBC's The Rachel Maddow Show.
Hi.
And joins us now. Thank you. It's great to see you during the day.
Thanks for having me here.
Well, let's talk about this whole conflict between, it's really a tap dance that we're seeing with the commanders. Don't officially request the troops, even though it's been leaked all over town. They want the troops. They want more troops. They think that it is necessary to avoid mission failure. But the question then becomes, what is the mission?
Yes.
What is the strategy? And how does the president get out of this bind?
I think the thing that was surprising about General McChrystal's report was not the assessment that the U.S. forces in Afghanistan could do more if they had more resources. That's sort of an axiom of military planning. Right. What was surprising was how damning he was about the Afghan government. Corrupt, abuse of power, these very strong terms that he's using. If the mission is that Afghanistan has a freestanding state, for the U.S. commanders to have that sort of an assessment of what we're building on, I thought made it seem like the mission was almost undoable.
And when the president says we have to have the strategy before we decide on the resources, last March there was a big speech. We all covered it. We talked it to death. And that speech was a strategy for military and civilian reconstruction and stabilization in Afghanistan. So what was that?
Well, one very big thing happened between then and now, which is the disastrous Afghan election. I think your previous guest was right. I think that actually changes the calculus a little bit. If we think about what we're doing there, we think about starting year 9 of this war on October 7th. And what for? What are those 68,000 Americans doing there now? Why have we doubled the number of troops that we've got there now? So that Afghanistan can have a real government and a real central state. Is that possible under any circumstances? Nobody knows. Can America give that to them? It doesn't feel like that. And that election made it feel more distant than ever.
And if the president defines the mission as we've got to stop al-Qaeda from having a safe haven so that they can regroup and attack the United States, we've got to protect the homeland. That's hard to do without stabilizing the whole country.
Yeah.
And so if you pull back from that, how does he avoid, incredible criticism politically from the John McCains and the Joe Liebermans and, neocons, Republican and Democrat, if this young president, pulls back from a war that he has described as the necessary war?
Right. Well, I think strategically and politically, the big picture is with him. I mean, strategically, you can say we want Afghanistan to have no safe havens. Al-Qaeda to have no safe havens. Al-Qaeda has safe haven now in Pakistan. Why wouldn't they have a safe haven in Somalia? Why wouldn't they have a safe haven in parts of Yemen? I mean, there are so many ungoverned parts of the world where these militants could have a presence. Politically, frankly, the neoconservatives have been wrong about everything they've ever thought about. And to look at Joe Lieberman and John McCain on some issues and all of these other conservatives and say, we're worried about getting criticism from you. Criticism from them is almost a badge of honor in American politics right now. Those guys have never seen a war they didn't want to escalate and never looked at a country they didn't want to start a war with.
Now, there was domestically, also politically, the whole question of race. The president dealt with it, I thought, very effectively on Letterman last night by saying that he was black before he was president. All these people voted for him. This is what Bill Clinton had to say on Larry King last night. Watch.
I believe that some of the right-wing extremists which oppose President Obama are also racially prejudiced and would prefer not to have an African-American president. But I don't believe that all the people that oppose him on health care and all the conservatives are racist. And I believe if he were white, every single person who opposes him now would be opposing him then.
Does Bill Clinton have the balance right? As far as you're concerned, what do you think?
I think talking about racism, on the one hand, it's very simple. On the other hand, it's very hard. Simply speaking, you can say, yes, racial animus motivates some of American politics, and it always has. And racial prejudice infects a lot of our hearts. It does. It's part of who we are. It's part of the human condition and the American condition. On the other hand, when you're talking about individual people and whether or not racism motivates their individual statements, we can't see into people's hearts. And unless people are going to admit overtly to racial prejudice, it's hard to say that's what's motivating it. Hatred is a complicated, ugly, multifaceted thing. And I think the most important thing for us as a country is to decide whether calling something racism helps us get past it. I don't really feel like there's a lot of shame when people are called racist. It's mostly just anger. And so it may be more constructive to say, all right, let's stop calling each other racist. Let's, shut down racism when we see it. But instead, let's move forward on being constructive and just demand a basic level of civility.
It's fascinating to see Bill Clinton. President Obama is going to be opening the Clinton Global Initiative later this afternoon. They had that lunch in the Italian restaurant in Greenwich Village. Hillary Clinton has been, for the most part, except for the NewsHour last night, declining all interviews this week because she says it's President Obama's week. I'm not going to, try to get it all into his spotlight there, or his space. Watching the Clintons navigate all of this week is so interesting, especially after the bitter primaries and the election of a year ago.
Yeah. The curse of the Clintons is that everything they do is fascinating. I mean, honestly, no matter what they're talking about, we're all riveted. They're the great Shakespearean characters of our American politics of this generation. And so everything they say is interesting. I mean, who wouldn't die to be a fly on the wall at that Il Molino lunch between the president and the former president last week? So everything they do is interesting. The thing, if Hillary Clinton would ever let me interview her, and someday, if I live to be 100, maybe it will happen.
Appeal for that right now,
right now,
right here. Hillary, are you watching? Rachel?
I promise it will be substantive and useful. I really want to know how she enjoys being Secretary of State and whether she feels like she's accomplishing a lot of the things that motivated her to seek higher office in the first place. And we haven't heard a lot from her in terms of personal reflection about what she thinks about that job. I think it would be fascinating to know.
From traveling with her, I can tell you she is loving it, and especially redefining it to expand it to the women's and human rights issues that she focused on in Beijing more than a decade ago. Wow. Rachel Maddow, what do you have tonight?
Tonight's sort of a wild card at this point, because right now we're still talking health care. The Senate Finance Committee is starting their big markup today with which not only means substantive legislative motion, but a lot of crazy histrionics that are both politically important and honestly quite fun to cover. So I think it's going to be another day of Wild West politics.
All right. A lot of log rolling in the Senate.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
It's such a treat. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks for coming in.